Today is the International Day for Human Rights. Before we understand the idea behind the evolution of the concept of human rights, let me tell you a very fundamental thing. We as human beings have so many rights, like the legal rights, political rights, economic rights, social rights, cultural rights. But imagine a situation that the very existence of human being as an individual or as a race is threatened. Then what is the meaning of any other right? Now that we understand that the human rights are so sacrosanct, they are so important, let me give you a word here that the human rights have to be seen as an umbrella rights. All other rights fall under the umbrella of human rights. Now let's try understand the evolution and the present context of the idea of human rights. So students, it all started from the ancient times when in 539 BC there was a war in which Cyrus the Great, who conquered Babylon, then decided to set free the people who had been taken as prisoner of war, understanding that even if they are from the enemy side, they still are human beings and they need to have some very basic fundamental rights. The idea had its inception. But for the modern generations, it will take centuries together to realize the importance of the idea behind this decision taken by Cyrus the Great. The next step in this direction was the coming of Magna Carta in 1215, when in England the king agreed that yes, some of the powers of the king have to be shared with the nobility and some of the rights of the people have to be respected. It was genuinely a milestone on the path to the growth or the evolution of the idea of human rights. Then came the English Bill of Rights in 1688, that came immediately after the Glorious Revolution, or what we call the Bloodless Revolution, where the people started getting more rights and the roots of democracy were laid in Britain, the mother of all democracies as it is called. The next step obviously was 1789 Declaration of the Rights of Man after America became independent. The war that started in 1776 ended in 1783, and thereafter the process of writing the constitution for the first democratic nation in the world with a written constitution began, and the constitution itself granted the rights to the people, making it one more step towards the evolution of the idea of human rights. Then there were some problems that we need to understand. The idea of human rights, how can it discriminate either on the basis of gender or sex, better it should be, and how can it discriminate on the basis of color, creed, race, or any such consideration. However, be it any country, let's talk about the greatest democracy in the present times, America. Even in America, the women were not given the status of equality. What to talk about the slaves? There had to be a civil war in 1861 for the slaves to get some kind of emancipation. Even the blacks, they have to fight for their existence. The names like Martin Luther, the names like Rosa Parks, they are very significant names to understand that how this idea kept on evolving, how this idea became all the more engrossing for the leadership all over the world. So the exclusion of women, the exclusion of people with certain colors, exclusion of members of certain social, religious, economic and political groups, that was a big concern behind the idea that the human rights must be available for every human being existing on the planet Earth. Now that World War I happened from 1914 to 1918 and the humanity saw wide-scale destruction and devastation, where we could see that there were almost 22 million people who died and almost the equal number of people were wounded. Now the idea became more important for the leadership all over the world, and when the League of Nations was formed, it decided to start some of the agencies like the International Labour Organization or the concerns for the rights or protection of the minority groups, but the complete idea of human right was still to take its complete shape or the final shape. After World War I, when Germany saw the rise of a totalitarian regime led by Hitler, the Nazi leader, and then started the genocide of the Jewish community, what is popularly called anti-Semitism. and the likewise policies were adopted by some of the other dictators of the time, be it Mussolini's Italy or Tojo in Japan or Mataskas or Dolphus, whosoever was there. We could see that there was the same kind of programs going all over the world, and there were the gulags in Russia that were to come up after Stalin coming into power. So it was a grave concern for the existence of all creeds of humanity, and thus the people, the leaders, they were becoming more and more anxious, they were becoming more and more careful. The events like the Atlantic Charter once being signed, or such other meetings that were taking place for the creation of a new body called the United Nations, every leader attending these meetings or these conferences, they had this idea that now is the time that we should stand up for the collective rights of the humanity. And by the time the World War came to an end, the time from 1939 to 45, when we saw that there were more than 80 million deaths, right, and there was unprecedented cruelty during the war, particularly in the concentration camps that were set up in Austria and the region around. So the leadership now finally made up the mind that along with the creation of the United Nations, this idea of human rights must be given its due respect, its due place. Initially, 50 countries stood up for the idea of peace and human rights. A commission on human rights was immediately established, and then the task of drafting the document began, and it was to talk about the fundamental rights and freedoms for all the human race. Initially, 30 articles were drafted, which obviously became that Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was adopted by the United Nations on the 10th of December 1948. Now that the world community has agreed to the idea of human rights, while we were still drafting our constitution and the Constituent Assembly in India was working, we believed that the entire idea has already been added to the Constitution of India, either in part 3 or part 4. There was no need as such felt at that time. But with the passage of time and as per the global requirements and as per the understanding of the changing circumstances, it was decided in 1993 that yes, now we will have a separate body called the National Human Rights Commission, which was then established on 12th of October 1993 as a statutory body. Obviously, yes, this calls for some kind of criticism, but then everybody cannot be given a constitutional backing, or everybody even doesn't require that constitutional backing. There are many bodies which are not even the statutory bodies, as there had been the Planning Commission or the present day Niti Aayog. We can go into the nitty-gritties and details in some other video, right? Then this body, which was a statutory body, was given the status of statutory existence on the basis of Protection of Human Rights Act 1993. Now in India we have National Human Rights Commission as well as State Human Rights Commissions, right? It is responsible for the protection and promotion of human rights defined by the Act as rights relating to life, liberty, equality and dignity of the individual. The word dignity is very meaningful here. It brings in its fold the idea of economic rights, the idea of cultural rights, the idea of social rights, and not just the idea of political rights. Now, if we talk in the present context, the idea of human rights in India has some kind of conflict with the idea of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act 1958. Many people believe that while the British were ruling India and in some of the areas that were felt to be disturbed by the British imposed these kind of powers, and in the name of these sweeping powers they could exploit the people, they could harass the people. Now what is the need of such an act in independent India? So here we will not go into the controversy because it requires a separate topic. So I will leave it to you to decide. If every human being has a right, and even if the terrorists who create terror, who kill the innocent people, who exploit the resources and who involve in creating unnecessary destruction, if they can be protected in the name of human rights, why couldn't the people who wear the uniform and are ready to sacrifice their life for the country and the people, why shouldn't they have some special power to tackle with extraordinary circumstances? Agreed that they should also be responsible enough to ensure that no innocent at any cost should pay the price for the peace to prevail. But at the same time, extraordinary circumstances do require some extraordinary powers. The balance has to be maintained, and we will definitely discuss this idea in a subsequent video very soon. Then the ideas like it violates the fundamental right, it has got immunity against any punitive action, it will be discussed in the separate video as I've just told. Now if we talk about like on what basis we can criticize the National Human Rights Commission, it may be called a toothless tiger because one, it has no power to penalize. Two, it is just a statutory body. There is no constitutional backing to it, but I have already said that every institution cannot be given and must not be given. But when it comes to such an important institution, yes, it is debatable that shall it be given the constitutional status or not. Then there are concerns over the process of appointment, and there had been many controversies. And I now realize that yes, we should have one separate topic of National Human Rights Commission, and it should be covered not just in a random manner. It should be covered in one such way that it should historically cover paper 1, it should politically and from the perspective of good governance cover paper 2, it should also bring in the relations of the international community. Then for internal security, there should be an idea that how the Human Rights Commission can be handy when we talk about internal security. And obviously yes, human rights and ethics, it cannot be left to a chance. So yes, we need one more topic to be covered, one more video to cover all these topics, and I would appreciate if you can leave a comment or two if you want this video or not. And finally, obviously yes, there is shortage of staff and funds that always like leads to a compromise in the performance of such an important body. Thank you very much, friends.